You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. And if you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, let us know what you're doing over the holiday season. I'll be doing a little bit of traveling all over God's green earth myself. Tell us in the comments down below. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Best prices on tickets, last tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. We got more on that fun later. But today, we're talking about the man himself, Austin Armstrong, officially introduced as the Houston defensive coordinator on Thursday. I also talk about a potential big-time portal recruit he may be bringing with him, supposedly. We'll talk about it. And then last but not least, I got other portal guys I've got an eye on as we stick with that topic during the football season. Hot topic right now is Houston's rebuilding some of its roster. But first, one of the men in charge of that was introduced to all of us in Austin Armstrong, defensive coordinator. And I thought it was interesting that it sounds like Fritz and the staff wanted him. They wanted Armstrong as the young wonderkind. In his early 30s, University of Florida co-defense coordinator this year, was the defense coordinator the year before. Had to split the duties of Ron Roberts this past year. Ron Roberts was much closer with Billy Napier, I think, on a lot of fronts, and it sounds like he got a little bit of favoritism in who's calling the plays where. Anyway, I think that it worked out to be more of a Napier old boys club kind of thing than anything, because the defense coordinator the year before obviously was the young Armstrong. Armstrong's got a lot of good coaches in his background. He worked with Nick Saban for about a month at Alabama. He worked with Kirby Smart at Georgia. He's been around the block. He himself is a Division III football player. That's a non-scholarship league. You got to really like football a lot to go do that to your body every day for the sake of doing it. Now, I feel like there's a lot of things about this guy I like, but I like some of the stuff he had to say in the press conference on Thursday when he was introduced. And I like that it sounds like he already sees a lot of similarities in the scheme between what they did at Florida or at Southern Miss, and both of which I guess were the same kind of scheme. And what we saw at Houston last year, both Florida last year and Houston last year had a 3-4 technically alignment on defense, but they had a hybrid player. Houston called it a dog position, right? Brandon Mack, Zach Strong, like those guys that could kind of roam a lot. You saw Latravian McCutcheon play at some by the end of the year. Sometimes they're down the line of scrimmage, sometimes they're in coverage, sometimes they're in the box, sometimes they're outside the box. They kind of move that position all over the place. At Florida, I think I saw they might have called it like a creeper or something like that, creep in on the line of scrimmage. I don't know. But the same kind of hybrid position is something he's familiar with. And so he's got a roster that, frankly, was, I'd argue, fairly successful last year, given the offensive woes. On the defensive side, that roster was pretty successful and is built around having a few down linemen, a hybrid guy, a pair of linebackers, and some coverage stuff. In getting in the X's and O's of stuff, I thought it was interesting, and watching some Florida video from 2023 this past week, both 2023 and also then 2024, but also 2022 because of a player we'll get into in a second. Florida spent a lot of the time that he was in the most charge lining up in cover 2 and then figuring out something else to do, right? And so I say it to say that, like, they disguised everything looked like a base cover 2, and then on the snap or as the clock wound down, play clock, so they start shifting into something else. 1, 3, 4, and all that is to say that the safeties do a lot of movement in that, right? So you line up cover 2, you got 2 high guys, cover nothing is behind them. Everyone else needs in some version of man or zone. You can tell basically on how the motion happens if they are passing it off or not, but that's not necessarily the big deal here. The biggest deal here is that either on the snap or as the clock would wind down, those safeties would shift to where it just would be 1 high, or they would shift over and a corner would drop back and go to 3 high, or they'd pinch middle field and both corners go back and it'd be 4 high. Or if they were really sitting in the house inside the red zone, they might both come down to the box and be cover 0 with no high, right? Like that's how these things would go. And they did it pretty consistent. Not to say they never ran cover 2, but they were all about show and then do something else, right? Show you cover 2, and then that's not what you do. Those are the things that they did. And I feel like he's stepping into a situation. He talked on Thursday some about complex stuff. They've got complex stuff that they've done at Florida. He's proud of that. He's got a very veteran back half of his defense. Brings back Latrell McCutcheon, right? Brings back Jeremiah Wilson. Brings back AJ Halsey. These guys have played a lot of ball, right? And so I think, and frankly, I'd argue played pretty high level ball while they did it. And I think that that's going to, as these defenses get more difficult or complex or whatever, having veteran guys in the back half of the defense that have played together, right, is going to suit that defense well. Timing of shifts and things like that's going to be important. They've played together a lot. Understanding what kinds of coverages lean into what players is important. Obviously, it's being a new coach, but the guys have played together in the back half and kind of understand where to lean and where to fill and how much space, frankly, Latrell can cover on his own in a cover 4 versus needing to get over and split the difference, right? Those kinds of things I think are important. The other thing I think is that this is important because in modern college football, where the quarterback has the microphone or the headphone thing in the back of his helmet, right, where you can hear the coach talking, you're seeing a lot more influence from offensive coordinators, right? They can talk to the quarterback up till I think it's the 20-second mark on the play clock. It might be 15. Don't quote me on that, but either way, till pretty far into the play clock, right? And what shifting your coverage so late does is it takes the coordinator out of it. You can't be like, hey, watch that safety. Hey, watch that corner. Hey, that guy's rolled down. The quarterback really has to make the play, puts a lot more of the onus on the college age kid, not the guy that's been doing this for a living for 40 years or whatever, playing the coordinator, right? Those are important distinctions that I think were interesting. The other thing, interesting thing as far as more on what he said on Thursday with Armstrong did not really beat around the bush. He said he does want to be a head coach someday, but I think that's a pro. He's not going to leave for another defensive coordinator job necessarily. Although I guess he just did that to Southern Miss and then Florida. What I do think it's interesting there is that he pointed out he wanted to come to learn from Willie, and that's pretty high praise given the coaches that he's chosen to work for, right? Billy Napier, you can watch it, but he's been around some pretty high-level coaches before that, and I think throwing Willie Fritz in that category or caliber of coaches, at least indicative of what a lot of people in the profession think of him. We hear this a lot. It was just echoed, I guess, is the big deal here. But that was the attractive piece once you got that phone call from Willie. I don't think it sounded like it took all that long once he got the phone call either. It sounds like he got hired officially on Friday and was recruiting a kid by Friday night. It sounds like he even said he sealed the deal with whatever the recruit that was and the transfer portal guy. So I can make guesses as to who it was based on when that would have happened, but that's not here or there. I think that the last thing I want to pull out of this is that he said that they want to focus on 3 things, and those I think are if we're going to be fair fans, 3 things to anticipate them being good at this year. Right? We'll talk about this a lot over the course of the offseason as they're building rosters, getting spring ball, etc. But they want to be good at tackling. See, it stands to reason that a bunch of missed tackles at different points last year, even as good as the defense was, getting better at tackling. He said, quote, normal football. And I take that to mean like middle second quarter, middle of the field, etc. Nothing crazy. And then, quote, situational football. Hey, you got to get a 3 and out here. Hey, 3rd and 13, final 4 minutes, you're up 2, right? You can't give up a field goal. Those kinds of situations are things that, frankly, not just because he got hired by North Carolina last week, but Bill Belichick was famous for having like practice and repped in New England. Situational football was a buzzword there in like the early 2010s in coaching. And it sounds like that's a very intentional thing for Austin Armstrong here and what he wants to bring. For what it's worth, Houston was kind of up and down in that last year. There were times where it felt like they were very aware of the situation, times where it felt like, it didn't maybe they were content in giving up a first down. They probably didn't need to give a first down, didn't want to give them into field goal range or whatever. And so I say it to say that, like, that's where you're hedging your bets on, do you take that gamble and undercut the out route or whatever based on what situation it is, or do you just make a sound tackle, want to, catch tackle kind of stuff. I say all that to say that I was impressed by Armstrong, given that it's generally coach speak and these kinds of things or whatever. But the more I dive into the video, the more I've listened to him talk, I think I am on board with this as someone who was kind of agnostic when it first happened. But I think I'll be a lot more on board if he starts bringing SEC caliber guys with him. The first, not the first of which, but the next of which, I should say, may very well be someone from his own Florida Gators. I want to get into that in a second. But before we get to that, I do want to remind you about Rocket Money. Rocket Money can help you find any subscription you forgot about or didn't even know that you were paying. That's definitely happened to me, actually. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was paying for. The Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users. I have to say I was impressed when I saw that, because I was like, oh, am I going to admit that I do this? No, over 5 million people use Rocket Money. It saved over 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is that subscription tracker. I've gotten to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton of money in 2024. Plus, with their quote goals, that's what they call it, feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for the future. I'll tell you guys a lot about Little Man. No more stressing out about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/locked on. Today's show is also brought to you by Game Time, and Game Time picked this new cool thing. We told you about Game Time before. Best place to get last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed, but Game Time Picks makes that even easier. They use artificial intelligence, AI, to tell you like the best value in the stadium for that type of event at that venue, based on what's available and what kind of seat you're looking at. It's a great way to kind of cut to the chase and see what the best seat in the house is. They got all in pricing. You don't have to get fooled by any last minute charges or whatever. They can see exactly what's going to cost you. I like that the lowest price guarantee means that you're getting the best deal. If you can find the same section and row cheaper somewhere else, they'll credit you back 110% of the difference, so you can get to that next Houston Cougar game even cheaper. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.